Tabo, and the border tower, Diana, Mahamudra, so on the get to run, young, so on. Get on the Yama, the Benji, to see the Roba, our Yanayam, only get. And then, less in Chungchuma, Lopo, Tertoma, and our lesson. There's an Tertoma down yonder, sending young, Daba Romney, and in the written Capella, and the Roba Tony. Manga, he said, Mummy, you see the color of the Castle, good Nasa, Mano, blessed the Pumbo Tawanto, had to be Toby, they and so sempre young in
this way, the King Indra Bhuti practiced on the basis of the Tantra Guya Samaja without having to abandon the worldly sensory pleasures that he so much liked. And as we have heard, he was nevertheless able to achieve the realization of rainbow body in this very lifetime, as did all of his retainers, subjects, etc. In the same way, if one could practice in this way, much the same would happen. One could also practice like the great master of yogins, Tilopa, who was known to spend the daytime by way of pounding sesame seeds and pounding the oil out of sesame seeds, and in the night time he worked as a bouncer at a local prostitute's. All the while, he always kept looking at mind nature. He always trained himself in being conscious and being aware, and in this way, while busying himself outwardly with all sorts of worldly activities, eventually achieved the highest of realizations, to such an extent that others would perceive him in all sorts of different forms. So there were people who perceived him as a light, much like a butter lamp or a candle that floated in space, surrounded by others. Others would just perceive him as a big sphere of light, all pervading. All of this on the basis of having recognized the very nature of consciousness itself, and at all times maintaining that recognition. So if we were to practice like that, much the same would come to pass. Many of the Indian Mahasiddhas of old had rather ordinary occupations. Some of them were shoemakers, others were weavers, making all sorts of textiles. Others were minding cattle. They were cowherds, looking after the sheep or goats or what have you. So they were going about very ordinary occupations, just like the majority of us. However, internally, they were not like ordinary people at all, because they constantly immersed themselves in being mindful, in being aware, in the recognition of the very nature of consciousness itself and all appearances and phenomena for that matter. And they maintained that recognition at all times. They were very diligent in upholding this recognition, and in this way they realized the state of the very nature that is known as Mahamudra. So while going about their ordinary occupations, they were constantly aware, constantly conscious for that matter, and gained the highest realization.
And Dhamma ke sana ke jipa ne chiyo mare tata sana ke jipa yom. Ta ngarang sona kambe sem ne ngarang sona ndo. Teni ngarang sona leka legure. Leka ke nyondo ta sem ke nyamne si kamna. Jeng zena charang sa soni leho no ni chwa top gure ta. Ta chiri di ta kari so ke. Jaycana di mati lula vesel mobo todu ta kare ko so. Ta tani yumri. Ta te tata ngarong sona rale ko. Ta tata ngarong jiting ke leka de legure tin jiti pa to chipare. Sem ke nyane kayo mazena ta jiti pa to chipare wa. Ta so ni chedu tani le jumje ke ji so rangure. Tani jaycana Nyawado Yadatan Rula Jawa Langre. Then Rawa Jaglin San, Tayo, Yutu Zongu Tokari Kaburava. Then Rawa La Sono Tangni, Sharon, Sam de Sana Gomjuti, Tata Yamni Chula Tokari. Li Hon Consul Tekra Tomni, Pa Cham Sun Cham, then Kamba Gutsi Mugu and Kamba Sarudo, Tata Mudo. Party Matapa, Salulandro.
With all of these possibilities at hand, particularly endowed at this present moment in this particular lifetime with a precious human body that is endowed with the 8 and 10 freedoms or leisures and riches, we would be well advised to make the greatest possible use of that opportunity. And the greatest possible use that we could possibly make of it is to train ourselves in all of these teachings that we have heard, to put all of these various methods and techniques that we have heard about into practice, so as to bring about the greatest possible understanding, familiarization, possibly even realization of these teachings, of these practices. Even if we were not to bring about any realization, any discernible realization during our lifetime, at the very least, to train ourselves in all of these regards would be very useful when eventually impermanence, which means death, would be upon us. In this way, we would make a difference between being rather more ordinary beings who do not have such opportunities at their disposal. However, if we were not to train ourselves in this way, if we were to pass up that wonderful opportunity that is given us, then by all means we might find ourselves after our death reborn under some circumstances which are rather more of the unpleasant nature. We might be reborn either in the animal realm, or we might be reborn under even worse circumstances. It is commonly known that when reborn as one of these denizens of the lower realms, then there is no opportunity to train ourselves in Dharma, to study or practice the Dharma in any which way. Therefore, we had better make good use of what opportunity we have right now, while we are in the possession of everything that it takes to learn and practice the Dharma. And if we were to do so, by all means it could happen that we would gain realization. Just as the Mahasiddhas of old who have been going about ordinary occupations, the vast majority of us have to do much the same thing. So why not use the opportunity that we have throughout the day to look at mind nature, look at the nature of appearances and phenomena for that matter, while we're going about our daily work, while we are performing our daily chores, or while we're going about our livelihood, whatever that may be. It could, in the one or other case, indeed happen that realization comes upon us while we're at work. all of a sudden, while busying ourselves in the office, realization could appear, and we could possibly shine rainbow lights, much to the utter amazement of our colleagues, or we could display such feats as dancing about to and fro and walking through walls and through doors without having to open them. Now that would leave our colleagues rather speechless, wouldn't it? But it could by all means happen. So it would indeed be a useful thing if we were to make use of what is given us right here and now, while we have the opportunity, rather than wasting what time we have at our disposal and not really knowing for sure whether or not such an opportunity will be upon us again in the future. Since time without beginning, we have again and again and again been reborn in the cycle of suffering that is known as samsara. In each of these lifetimes, we've had a body with flesh and blood and everything that the body comes with. And if we had begun already back then to collect all of these bodies, there would be a heap of bodies larger than the largest mountain in this world. While we've been living through all of these lifetimes, we have experienced all sorts of unspeakable sufferings, and we have undergone all sorts of difficulties, and we have cried ourselves an ocean of tears. If we had collected all of these tears, there would be a body of water larger than the largest ocean in this world. And in this way, we have been born again and again, and if we do nothing about it, in all likelihood, it's going to go on like this again and again. However, now we have the opportunity at hand to make an end to this cycle of suffering, make an end to this cycle, bring an end to this cycle of rebirth, because now we have the wherewithal at hand to break through this cycle. We have all the means at our disposal to bring about the awakening of Buddhahood, and if we were to do so, then indeed there would be no further need for further rebirth within this cycle of suffering and for the experience of all its untold inconveniences, etc. On top of that, we would bring about the added benefit of having the opportunity, having the ability for the first time of spontaneously acting for the benefit and welfare of all other beings. Therefore, as Rinpoche says, we would be well advised to make good use of what opportunity we have now. If not now, then when? Why let that opportunity go to waste when we have everything that's needed to make an end to this involuntary rebirth in the cycle of suffering, to bring an end to that, or to break through this cycle. So therefore, if we would think about it properly, then we would make the greatest possible use of what we have at our disposal at the moment.
Nanto Kanyo Mena, this Nepa Mo. Nepa Yamba Teni, Nepa Yen Sambe, Tani, Rico those, Le Tambo Pala, Gomza, Gomzi, Miorava, Gomza, Sam, Gomzi, Rikbam, Tenshi. That Tenshi, that Tipatic, Janet, Tata, Nepa Gamolando, somebody, Tenshi, Tango. I never take a moment not to take the Yonata in Joara. Young, can she on, reparty, that not to see left some hard work. I am not to take it, never doubt. That's it now, Tina, Tenny, not to Tenny Paul Yanni, young Sam Nepagamona, Lemon one. They are to Tenny, can she do the let a mobile change to Google young Monroe top can in the Tato Sendino. The man at any Chundroe, young Roe, any gone Tani Togama, gone on Roma. The Charlotte of the Soldier. Anna Kashi, Happy Kashi Susi, Rashapo, Dana, Yomi, Gamaya. Gone, Sunny Yapoli, Mari gone, on so much. Gone, de la Pachi Momoriti, can't eat it. Nanto, Mandra, Hammo, Lefty, Sunny gone Yapoli, Masu. There is some for you. Then he sounds on you, gone dead, Nanto never, simply Nipa. Deva Mondo, nearby Yona, Tati Penny Yapoliti somewhere, Taragon Yapoliti, Gona, Pati, Majo, Yamukani, this Sente Nipa to Deva Chipoliti. This is all good, Cheros on the Labora. Then I know Nipa don't Joanna Chipari, San Nena, Nanto Mena, San Coron More. Nando Yona, San Coronca, Ronzare, then you walk it by, there's only Chayo Mare. They and that she
If we were to train ourselves, as we have heard over the last couple of days, along the lines of Kamachak's teachings, then by all means we would experience the one or other state of meditation as he explains them in his text. We would either train in being aware of our mind being still, free of any mental activity, or we would be aware of mind being active, of there being thoughts, memories, or whatever it is that might pop up in our minds. In either case, we would train ourselves in being aware of these, of either state. And in this way we have heard, according to Kamachak's teachings, that there are these three. We have either stillness, or movement, or we simply, and on top of this, we have simply the being aware of either fact, the recognizing either state of mind. Now, if we were to practice in this way, then by all means, the one or other recognition of this sort could occur, could come to pass. As we're beginners in this discipline, for the time being, we still make a difference between the actual act of meditation and the meditator. We differentiate between that which needs to be done, the chore that is at hand, which is meditation practice, and the one who does the actual practicing. So we still live in this kind of dualism of there being, of there needing something to be done, and there being someone who actually does it. For the time being, while we're beginners, this is by all means all right, but eventually, of course, that should be transcendent. And because we still hold on to this dualism, we hold on to this and that as being different from something or other, accordingly, we occasionally then go to our teachers and either complain or praise ourselves in various ways, saying, well, I've tried recently, I've sat for hours, I've meditated for days, but nothing worked. There was nothing but a constant stream of thoughts, a constant stream of ideas and memories, etc., and so forth. mental tranquility would not come to pass at all. It was a total disaster area. Nothing worked. Total failure. Or at other times, we might experience the tranquil, completely quiescent state of mind, in which there was no particular movement of thoughts or memories or whatever of that sort at all, and we might go and tell our teachers, now I've got it, now it really worked, I've finally broken through the barrier, and this is how it worked out for us. This is all on the basis of practicing under the assumption that there's a difference between these two states, which there is not. It is just the erroneous assumption that they are in any way separate from each other. Whereas when it comes down to it, whether mind presents itself as tranquil, free, and a restive state without any activity, or whether mind presents itself full of mental activity, both are nothing else but the expression of one and the same mind. It is the essence of mind, the self-nature of mind, that is presenting itself in this way or that, or the other way. The important thing that needs to be done whenever we train in such practice is to recognize this and to train ourselves on top of that in being as undistracted as possible at preferably any given moment. So this idea of the one state of mind or the other state of mind being two completely different things, not having anything to do with each other, is an erroneous one. It is mind which has the capability to manifest itself in either this way or that. There's always the same mind that manifests itself such or such. No difference whatsoever. That needs to be recognized and ideally undistractedly, consciously at all times. If we were to attempt Mahamudra practice along these lines, it is said that the friend of such Mahamudra practice is the practice of addressing oneself to one's root teacher, the practice that we commonly know as Guruyoga. If we were to train in this repeatedly, we could make sure, we could rest assured that indeed we would receive the blessing and inspiration of the teacher, of all the teachers of the transmission lineage for that matter, in which our teacher stands, and all the various qualities would eventually arise within ourselves. We would train ourselves in the Guruyoga practice, practice the four empowerments, receive in this way blessing and inspiration of the teacher. And it does not make a difference at this particular point whether or not our teacher truly is a fully awakened Buddha. If we have the trust, the confidence in our teacher to be no different from the Buddha, to personify the qualities of a Buddha, then indeed his blessing and inspiration will be of the same power, and whatever qualities come about through our practice, which will be aided by the blessing and inspiration of the teacher by way of receiving the four empowerments in the course of Guruyoga practice, etc., will definitely be a sure thing. Of that we can rest assured.
Te topar gugendo san sambato minje te si gana. Te naron so momba sonji je kong topar se bi jute sonju ke sandere. Sonju ke san teni mena sonji je kong topar jutani yona. Sonju sandere yona. Te zando rang rang sana so sana. Yo yoga teni sonji kong topar tera teni 송지 동보 송주조도 토끼네 송지 잠진대죠 당보 송주조도 산지 되는 가봐 동문선을 상하고 소소 되는 디긴지로 송지 공은 마랑 저거 디기 순주과 인주 되는 송주 그 산한테서 sonam.
On top of everything else that has been said, it is absolutely necessary to give rise to the enlightened attitude that is commonly known as Bodhicitta, which really means the awakened heart. The enlightened attitude of Bodhicitta is the attitude that allows us to strive for the accomplishment or go after the accomplishment of the awakening of Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. We remind ourselves of the fact that the world, the universe for that matter, is full of beings, an untold number of beings who in one lifetime or other have been helpful, have been kind to us, have nurtured us, protected us, etc. and so forth. All of these beings in one lifetime or other have even been our kind mothers, fathers, siblings, what have you. All of these beings are immersed in constant suffering, and therefore we give rise to the attitude, to the wish from the very bottom of our hearts to achieve the awakening of Buddhahood, not only for our own petty selves, but for the sake of all of these beings, in order to repay that debt of gratitude which we definitely owe them. Not only is it necessary for us to do so, it has been necessary for all the Buddhas in the past to do so, to give rise to this attitude of bodhicitta, and it will be necessary for all the Buddhas in the future to do so. It is clearly said time and again in scripture and teachings of whatever sort that without bodhicitta there can be no achievement of Buddhahood. There is no such thing. All Buddhas that have ever appeared in the past have initially given rise to that thought of bodhicitta, to that attitude to practice for the sake and welfare of all beings, and so invariably will all Buddhas in the future. Bodhicitta is an absolute necessity. There is no way whatsoever to achieve Buddhahood without that thought of bodhicitta. Therefore, on top of everything that we have heard and on top of all the instructions that we have already received, it is absolutely indispensable to give rise to that very attitude. Time and again we're being told that all beings, not a single one excluded, at one time or other have been loving and kind mothers, fathers, spouses, or whatever else. When thinking about this, we might often just think, how so? And then we would be well advised to simply look at our present life in order to understand how this works. All of us have at one time or other been born into this world. Certainly not without the help of our mothers. And also we have not progressed throughout this life to the present point without the help of others. While we were small, while we were infants, toddlers, we have been nursed and fed and protected by our mothers and other people in our lives, by aunts, uncles, whatever you might have, by siblings, by friends of the family, whoever they might be, grandparents for that matter. And we have all invariably at one point or other in our lives experienced that one such person that has been important in our lives, that has been kind to us, that has been helpful and friendly to us, has passed away. The time of their life was over, their mind got separated from their body, which is commonly known as the process of death, and then their consciousness has moved on through the intermediate state to some other birth. Now, we do not possess the clairvoyance to see where these kind people who have helped us so much, who have nurtured and protected us so well, have gone. The only thing that we know for sure is that after having passed away and having gone through the experience of the intermediate state, they will have been born again somewhere in one or other state of rebirth, in one or the other realm of existence that is possible. This is the way it is, this is the way it will continue to be forever. And this is the way it has always been. Therefore, whatever beings there are in the world, in one way or other, in one lifetime or other, we have certainly been connected with them in exactly that way. All of the beings, all of whatever sort of being we could possibly think of in this world, in this universe for that matter, has at one time or other been that kind person in our lives, and therefore we are absolutely connected in one way or other through one lifetime or other with all of these beings. What it all comes down to in the end is that we have to train ourselves again and again in avoiding distraction. As we have heard so many times, as we have heard just a minute ago, we have been born again and again in this cycle of suffering since time without beginning. Since time without beginning, we have allowed ourselves to form the habit of being distracted. We have hardly ever in any lifetime trained ourselves in being conscious and being vividly, freshly aware of what is going on. Therefore, to be distracted has become second nature, so to speak. Now, for once, now we have the opportunity to learn about how not to be distracted. We are being given various methods of avoiding this, and we, by all means, ought to train ourselves in the various methods that avoid distraction. Therefore, by all means, when this teaching is over, or when this course is over, and each and every one of us returns to their own place, we could try, while being on the road, to train ourselves in being undistracted, and being constantly conscious of whatever it is that is appearing, that is happening in our mind streams. And we could try by all means to perpetuate that practice throughout our daily lives. Since we are under the influence of that strong habit, that rather solidified habit of being distracted, it goes without saying that eventually distraction will be upon us again. For the most part, we won't be able to recognize, to remember when, at what particular moment distraction set in. But once we become aware of the fact that we have been distracted, we can guide our consciousness, our awareness, back to being aware, back to being conscious. In all likelihood, we will have to train in this discipline again and again. It is not something that will come naturally, it is not something that will come easily, but once we form the counter-habit, so to speak, of training in being undistracted, rather than allowing distraction to rule our lives at all times, we've made a beginning. So therefore, to avoid distraction, and to try to be aware, to try to be conscious as much as possible, possibly, ideally at any given moment, that is what needs to be trained in time and again. And this is now the moment at which we could try that.
And there's
opportunity for a few questions.